He's a different kind of hero.
There's something about a guy who's swinging across town on a spider web.
The idea of a superhero with everyday problems is revolutionary today as it was when he came up with it.
My publisher, Martin Goodman, he hated everything about it. He wouldn't let me publish it.
It totally revolutionized the comic book industry.
Who fights crime in a very special city.
What we really wanted to do was bring you Spider-Man's New York.
His name is Spider-Man. And when Activision and Treyarch set out to make the biggest Spider-Man game of all time,
by the time this game is done, well over 100 people will have had their hands on this project.
We have more supervillains and superheroes than any previous Spider-Man game.
the results are spectacular. This is the making of Ultimate Spider-Man. It's the early 1960s, and Marvel Comics wants Stan Lee to create a new superhero.
Well, I had been doing comics for so long, came up with the Fantastic Four, then I did the Hulk, and they were both very successful, so my publisher, Martin Goodman, he said, hey, come up with another superhero. So I thought of Spider-Man, and I told him about it, and man, he hated it. He said, Stan, people hate spiders. That's no name for a hero. Then when I told him I wanted him to be a teenager, he said, don't you know anything about what a superhero should be? He hated everything about it. He wouldn't let me publish it.
But Lee decides to go ahead with his story about a teenager named Peter Parker who gains amazing powers after being bitten by a radioactive spider.
We had a magazine called Amazing Fantasy, and we were going to drop it. When you're about to drop a magazine, nobody cares what you put in the last issue. So I featured Spider-Man on the cover and had a story of Spider-Man. Well, when the sales figures came in, that had been our best-selling magazine of the whole year. So Martin walked into me. He said, you know, Stan, do you remember that Spider-Man character of yours that we both liked so much? Why don't you make it a series? And that's how it happened.
In 1963, the web-crawling hero gets his own comic book.
Spider-Man proved to be a very popular character in the 1960s. He had had his own book, which was Amazing Spider-Man, for the longest time.
Spidey's adventures are brought to life by Stan Lee and artist Steve Ditko.
Stan was scripting all this stuff, and Steve plotted most of it, and Stan dialogued it. Together, it was something magical.
Steve Ditko's artwork had almost a Picasso feel to it. It was almost cubist, and if you look compared to other comic books of that time, no one's ever imitated him. It's a very unique look to it.
Steve Ditko pretty much created everything cool about Spider-Man. All of his major foes were created during Steve Ditko's run. Right on down the line, from the Green Goblin to the Vulture to Dr. Octopus and Sandman.
Everything about Spider-Man, from his costume to his alter ego Peter Parker, draws in readers, and comic book fans can't get enough.
Stan Lee really rocketed into fame for creating heroes that had flaws, that had a real life, that had a personality beyond the cape and cowl, beyond the spandex.
One of the things that made Peter Parker really so very successful is what my publisher objected to. It was all the problems.
He's Peter Parker first, and it's kind of Spider-Man second. He's a younger character, so who's got real-world problems. He lives alone with his aunt, and he goes to high school, and he's got a girlfriend, and he tries to balance all these real-world things that kids in society just relate to.
The idea of a superhero with everyday problems is revolutionary today as it was when he came up with it. It's so mundane in a way, but it totally revolutionized the comic book industry.
He forever kind of changed the way we look at heroes.
At the heart of the Spider-Man mythos is a key lesson.
With great power comes great responsibility. Really think about that. You could actually live by that code, and only that code, with no religion in your life, and live a very fulfilling life. It's an amazing idea.
The Spider-Man phenomenon just keeps growing.
At some point, they decided, this guy is a mark of quality. We gotta do something more with him.
And soon, the name Peter Parker will become more well-known than Marvel ever expected. After more than 40 years of crime fighting, Spider-Man has become a household name. Comic book artists such as Todd McFarlane and Eric Larson gain notoriety from their work on the Spider-Man comics. The friendly neighborhood web-slinger spawns numerous comics and 2 blockbuster films.
Oh, you didn't have to be a genius to realize how successful Spider-Man was. Well, the book sold like there was no tomorrow.
Soon after the turn of the new century, Marvel launches Ultimate Spider-Man, a modern retelling of the classic hero.
With the Ultimate books, we're able to just start over from scratch. It's about our world and our times, but still about the classic magic of a Marvel comic.
It was exciting to take the Ultimate approach to the character, where he's younger and he's dealing with kind of different things.
Peter Parker in the Ultimate series is a web designer, not a photographer. He deals with a lot of current day issues. When the comic was first conceived by Stan Lee in the early 60s, there are a lot of issues that might not resonate as well with teens today. So we've actually taken the storylines from the Ultimate comic book series, which is really updated to modern day.
Ultimate Spider-Man becomes a smash hit for Marvel. And it soon catches the attention of Activision.
We looked at what was going on in comic books today, and really Ultimate Spider-Man, the comic book from Marvel, was the #1 seller in Spider-Man comic books right now. So that's what we really wanted to go after.
Activision enlists Treyarch to create a game based on the new series.
Treyarch and Activision started working together in the late 1990s on a couple Tony Hawk games for the Dreamcast. They also did a Spider-Man game for a Dreamcast. Treyarch was the perfect fit.
Activision approached us in April of 2003 with the idea that they wanted to do a Spider-Man game based more on the classic Spider-Man comic book license versus the movie games. We have been the company that's done both of the Spider-Man movie games.
Development of Ultimate Spider-Man begins in June 2003. To ensure that they do justice to the series, Treyarch turns to the people behind the comics for guidance.
One of the first things that we wanted to do was to go after some of the talent that was involved in the creation of the comic book for Marvel. So we went after Brian Michael Bendis. We wanted to bring him in very early on and have him help to craft our story.
Bendis is great. He is so synonymous with Marvel now. He writes so much of our stuff, from Spider-Man to Pulse to Daredevil. Brian is the epitome of Marvel.
They presented us with an idea for the game that was so loyal to the comic book, it was so flattering.
We also wanted to involve Mark Bagley, who is the sole illustrator of all the Ultimate Spider-Man books. So we brought him in, had him do all of our character concepts.
Mark Bagley is a wildly underestimated artist.
The nice thing about Bagley's look is it's kind of a more clean, stylized look. That's what makes it a really easy transition for the guys at Treyarch to make his look work in 3D.
To attain a look that stays true to the comic books, Treyarch implements an entirely new graphic style.
The look was the first thing that jumped out at us. The Ultimate Spider-Man, it doesn't look like any of the previous Spider-Mans. It doesn't look like the movie. It's its own entity, and we really wanted to capture that because it was very exciting and it was very new.
Ultimate Spider-Man's really sort of like Spider-Boy. He's still in high school, and so he's got sort of this egg-shaped head and a thinner neck and these elongated features.
So we spent a lot of time examining all of the books at that time, trying different techniques to try and capture that look. We didn't want a Saturday morning cartoon look. We wanted something that was what modern comics are today.
So we wrote a new shader from the ground up. It's a combination of texture maps and our own shader technology. We use a very high polygon model to achieve the inking style. These characters are up to 7,000 polygons. He's closer to 9,000 polygons.
3D comic inking technology is something we created here in-house. What it does is it creates this comic feel for the game. When you see the characters, they're just more three-dimensional. There's more depth, there's more shadows. You're seeing these characters as if you're really standing right in front of them.
A new approach to graphics isn't all Treyarch does to capture the feel of the comics.
In looking at comics to see what we wanted to try to bring, we examined them, and some of the obvious things that came out were panels and storytelling.
You have to have panels. That's what the comic book medium is about.
The motion graphics panels really drive not only our story, but they drive gameplay as well. So as Spider-Man, for instance, is swinging down the street and we've got a person trapped under a burning car, you'll have a panel that will fly up on the screen and then seamlessly integrate itself right back into gameplay.
She's getting crushed. I don't have much time.
Let the player know that there's a situation that they need to deal with.
So panels are popping up while you're playing. Kind of give the player hints and clues or close-ups on the villain's face when they're having kind of a long-distance conversation. It really frees you up and
really adds to the immersive quality of the overall gaming experience.
Now that the technical aspects of the game are nailed down, Treyarch must work on making Ultimate Spider-Man live up to its name. Treyarch is set on making Ultimate Spider-Man the biggest and most ambitious Spider-Man game ever made. To pull it off, they'll stretch every resource they have to the limit.
It's a pretty amazing thing, the scope of a project like this. We are currently staffed at 85 people on this project. We have a group of around 12 to 15 animators, 17 programmers, 7 production staff members, 15 game designers. We have a whole team of 3D modelers who create all the geometry for the game, and then a whole subgroup of that of guys who do the 2D artwork. We have a special effects team, a whole audio department. By the time this game is done, well over 100 people have had their hands on this project.
Well, there's definitely a collaborative process that goes on between our lead designer, Brian Reed, and our creative director, Chris Bussey, and Brian Michael Bendis. They kicked around some ideas for what a storyline was. We had extensive research at Activision, what the most popular Spider-Man characters are. One of the ones that just sort of rose to the surface was Venom.
When we introduced Ultimate Venom into the comic book, our sales spiked. They almost doubled. It was shocking, because we were doing all right to start with. I had no idea that Venom was that popular.
We decided that we wanted to use Venom and do a Venom storyline.
When Peter Parker was a boy, his dad and his best friend Eddie Brock's dad worked together to create what's called the Venom suit, and it was supposed to be a cure for cancer.
And they created this hideous, monstrous suit that feeds off of the living force of people, turns you into a superhuman, but also makes you just uncontrollable. They tried to destroy their work because it was going to be turned into a weapon. Eddie Brock's father saved a little piece of it for his son to find, sort of his legacy. Both of their parents died under mysterious, tragic circumstances, and that really kind of sets them off on their different paths.
10 years later, Eddie has found a sample of the suit, and it's been part of his college work to do research on it. Eddie puts on the suit. He becomes permanently bonded to it and becomes Venom.
Eddie loves the power. He craves the darkness. Instead of wanting to get rid of the suit, he wants to learn how to control the suit and really be the supreme evil.
So that's what happened in the comic book. Where we come into the story, it's 3 months later. Eddie Brock is still loose in New York with Venom on him and is completely out of control. And as the two come back together, this mystery of how the suit came into being, what happened to Peter Parker and Eddie Brock's parents. So we have all these questions that have never been answered that we get to tell everybody for the first time.
To truly tell the tale of Venom and Spider-Man, Treyarch makes Venom a playable character.
We definitely wanted to have that be a big part of the game. And there's this central storyline that's going on, and there were key points where if you only knew it from the Spidey side,
I guess there's no such thing as a slow day when you're a big-time superhero.
you would never get what was going on. And so it was essential that we had you play from the Venom side.
It shows the connection between our two playable characters that wasn't gone into as much depth in the comic book storyline.
I love playing Spider-Man. I mean, it's fun to swing around, but the idea of destruction and being this kind of massively big, violent, very strong character that can really wreak havoc in the city is very exciting, really fun, and that's a pretty cool thing for a video game.
As fun as it is to be Spider-Man and swing around the city and to save people, and the antithesis of that, there's a hedonistic pleasure breaking things and destroying things and blowing stuff up, eating people.
We wanted both sides to be playable, but different.
Where there's just totally different locomotion and combat systems for each player. Spider-Man is very graceful, he's agile, his combat's frenetic, he's acrobatic, he's fast, he jumps off the walls. He's everything you expect a young 15-year-old spaz to be able to do after being bit by a radioactive spider.
It's more frenetic. It's fast, it's in, it's out. It's off walls, off light posts, off guys.
On the other hand, you got Venom, who's this hulking, enormous, he's heavy, he's slow, he punches holes in things. There's a tremendous sense of weight.
Venom's got kind of this super jump. And he's about being monstrous and taking guys out with one swing, using his tentacles to wrap people up and feed on them.
He consumes them inside of his body, and he spits them out unconscious and covered in slime laying on the sidewalk. It really just balances out the gameplay for us.
Spider-Man and Venom won't be alone. Treyarch has virtually limitless access to the legendary Marvel Universe, and they're gonna take full advantage of it. Treyarch and Activision have set out to make the mother of all Spider-Man games with Ultimate Spider-Man. A big part of their goal is to include as many cameo appearances as possible. The list of heroes and villains who will appear in their game is awe-inspiring.
Of all the Spider-Man games that have come out, this is going to be the largest slate of supervillains in any of the previous Activision Spider-Man games.
We were going to grab everything we could at Marvel and throw it into this game. We've got Johnny Storm. We have got just this pile of Marvel heroes in our game.
We were introduced to tons of characters in the Ultimate Marvel Universe. Some we've already met before, some we've never seen in the Ultimate book before, that people have actually been dying for, like Ultimate Beetle and Ultimate Silver Sable is going to be a big one. But plus tons of cameos. You got Nick Fury's in it, Mary Jane's in it.
The Ultimate, franchise opens up a new take on all these bad guys. The Ultimate Rhino looks very different from Rhino from the classic series. These are characters you've heard about over the years in the Marvel universe, but you're seeing them kind of again and new for the first time, which is pretty cool.
The biggest challenge is to make sure that everybody is their own special kind of unique thing. Rhino is 3 stories tall and charging through Queens, knocking down buildings, throwing cars at Spider-Man during their boss fight. Then when you fight Green Goblin, you're chasing him through the streets of New York again, but their fight ends up crashing through the roof. And they end up fighting in the Grand Hall there. And it's fireballs everywhere and Spider-Man fighting the Green Goblin.
We have more interactive superheroes and supervillains than any previous Spider-Man game.
One of the things that's really nice about the Ultimate Spider-Man brand is that it really centers a lot around Peter and his life. So we bring those characters to life in the game as well. So we're really able to kind of dig deeper into Peter and his interactions with the people around him.
Heroes and villains aren't all that's packed into Ultimate Spider-Man.
What we really wanted to do was bring you Spider-Man's New York. Means you get to go to all of the landmarks that Spider-Man could go to. You get to go to Queensboro Bridge, where Green Goblin nearly killed Mary Jane.
We actually sent a couple of our artists to New York during pre-production to go and photograph all over New York. We photographed textures and just little things like manhole covers, signs going into like Little Italy and Chinatown, and taking pictures to get those flavors.
Queens is where Peter lives with his Aunt May. It's where he goes to high school. So it was just kind of the logical step to take for us to expand this environment to include Queens. It just gives the player the freedom to kind of go anywhere they want in this city and be that heroic Spider-Man character.
As the September 2005 release date for Ultimate Spider-Man draws near, development begins to wrap up. The people at Treyarch and Activision look back at what they've accomplished and are confident that the game represents their best efforts.
Mostly, I'm really excited about the story we get to tell and the events that we get to do and the fact that we actually fit into the comic book continuity. For this little brief moment in time, I actually get to touch Peter Parker's life and do something to it is really the coolest part of this project for me.
The stuff that we're doing in this is going to be carried on. Bendis is going to carry those storylines in the comic book, and he's going to be making sure that stuff that's happening in the comics are at least tangentially related to what's going on in the game.
It's always a challenge to take what you start out with ideas and designs and to actually make them come to life in the game. And that's really a testament to the talent that we have over here at Treyarch.
This was one of the best experiences I've ever had. And there's so many people involved. When we create the comic book, it's just a handful of people, whereas there's so many developers and special effects guys. I was just kind of bracing myself for this thing to kind of lose its edge, and it never ever did, and it was a really awesome experience.
Marvel is so lucky to have Activision doing these games. I was really sucked into the world of Spider-Man while I was watching that game. It's unbelievable. I think that these video games are just about the greatest kind of entertainment you could find anywhere. I was sitting at my desk and I saw a fly crawling on the wall. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be cool to have a superhero who could crawl on walls? And then I needed a name for him. So I thought, well, Fly Man? Nah, it didn't sound dramatic. Mosquito Man? Nah. Insect Man? Nah. Spider-Man? Ooh, Spider-Man. It sounded dramatic, it sounded scary, and that's how it happened. What is his normal identity going to be? What's his alter ego going to be? And I wanted to do something different. I figured I'll make him a teenager, but he won't be a teenage sidekick. He will be a teenage superhero. And I want him to have a lot of problems so that the average teenager reading the book could empathize with him, could figure, hey, I know how he feels, boy. I got the same problems. When you take away the spider powers and the crazy villains, he's probably the most realistic superhero of all. He's just a guy, you know, with the problems you and I have. In the beginning, he was just another character I had made up, and I hoped that he would sell so that I could keep my job and be able to pay the rent. That was about as far as my thinking went. I think the main thing that makes Spider-Man so appealing as a video game character is the fact that he does things that no other character does. The fact, just the web swinging alone, what could be more exciting? The way Brian Michael Bendis is retelling the story of Spider-Man for the next generation is way cool. He's giving it a new twist. You're seeing Spider-Man in a different way, and yet he's keeping it true to the image of the real Spider-Man. It's the first time that a player can be the villain. And what a villain to play. Venom. I mean, Venom has to be the worst, the deadliest, the most evil, the most dangerous, and the most unique villain that Spider-Man or any hero has ever fought. I think if I were doing another villain for a Spider-Man game, what I would suggest is having a double villain, Kraven and Sandman. They're both totally different, and even Spider-Man would have a tough time beating them. But he'd have a tough time beating either one, but both of them, man, that would be fun. I think the idea of doing the Ultimate Spider-Man as though it's a living comic book is a great idea. That doesn't work if you're taking a badly done comic book. But when you take a comic book as good as the Ultimate Spider-Man and you put it into a game as good as what Activision is capable of doing, and you combine those two so that the player gets the feeling that he's not only playing a video game, but he's playing a comic book which has come to life. I mean, that's got to be incredibly exciting. I guess my similarities with Peter Parker are the fact that, like everybody else, I always have problems. Things never turn out perfectly for me. And as far as my similarity to Spider-Man, well, I guess the easiest way to put it, we are both wonderful human beings, very glamorous. Everybody loves us, and we're also, well, in this case, I'm probably a little crazier than Spider-Man. But seriously, Spider-Man is a great character. And as long as the people working on Spider-Man care as much about him as we do, and as long as the public still clamors for exciting, original entertainment, I think Spider-Man has a very long shelf life.
Hey, this is Brian Reed, lead designer for Ultimate Spider-Man at Treyarch. I'll be giving you the inside track on some exclusive tips and tricks, making you an expert in everything from combat strategies to crushing your toughest adversaries. Even though Spider-Man is a pretty able fighter, it's good to remember he has a few tricks up his sleeves that will help you take your fighting skills from merely amazing to ultimate. When facing an enemy, you can use your web shooter in combination with different attack buttons to perform some pretty fancy moves. Keep in mind that holding your web attack button will wrap an enemy in webbing. If you continue to hold the web attack button, you can tap, punch, kick, or grab to perform different special attacks. For example, hold down the web attack button, then press punch to reel in the bad guy and perform a two-fisted slam on his head. When you hold down the web attack button and press kick, you'll reel him in and then perform a jumping backflip kick, which kicks him way out in front of you. When holding down the web attack button, press grab. Spidey will zip towards the enemy and perform a forward flipping two-footed stomp. If there's a lamppost nearby, press the web attack button and then jump, and you'll leave the enemy hanging from the lamppost. This will take them out of the fight for a little while and let you concentrate on his friends. Finally, when you're holding down the web attack button, you can push the left analog stick the opposite direction of the bad guy to send them flying on a web line. Spider-Man will do a lot more damage if you switch between punches and kicks. If you just punch on a guy for a while, you're going to hurt him, but not as bad as you will if you go back and forth between the punches and kicks. Also, be sure to do what Spider-Man does. Bounce off walls. Push the left analog stick towards a wall, press punch or kick, and watch Spidey bounce around and do even more damage to bad guys than usual. Spider-Man also has different punches, kicks, and combos available to him while fighting. During combat, use nearby walls for some creative attacks. Pushing the left analog stick towards the wall, then pressing punch or kick buttons will activate those special moves. Spider-Man will jump and propel himself off the wall into nearby enemies. This is a great move, especially if you find yourself cornered. Venom can grab enemies by pressing, conveniently enough, the grab button. What he does next is entirely up to you. Press and hold the grab button to grab an enemy and follow it up by pressing the punch button. Venom will slam the enemy face down on the pavement as hard as he can. Press the punch button, followed by the grab button. Venom will grab an enemy and try to snap them like a twig. When a claw or tentacle attack just isn't enough to put your enemy down, well, Venom can throw cars. To use a car as a weapon, all you have to do is pick it up with the grab button. Venom will then toss the car with all of his strength. Pressing the grab button twice rapidly will make Venom perform a quick throw. Using the right analog stick, you can aim the direction you want Venom's car toss to go. This allows you to put the damage exactly where you want it. Once you master these moves, your enemies will truly fear you. When the battle begins, Rhino has made his way to a construction yard and is attempting to rip out a massive gas storage tank. Now this is bad news for all involved, so here's some tips to help Spider-Man save the day. Attack Rhino by jumping up and grabbing onto his back. Pounding on Rhino's armor will get the big guy's attention. Once Rhino is focused on Spidey, you can lead him over to the big patch of wet cement. When Rhino does his power punch and gets his hand stuck in the wet cement, it's time to activate the wrecking ball and send him flying. In the second half of this battle, Rhino will lead Spider-Man into a used car lot. The trick here is to focus your attacks on the broken panel in Rhino's back. Dodge Rhino's attacks until the electricity on his back has gone away, and then Spidey can grab on and pound away. Repeat this a few times and you'll win the battle with ease. Venom and Wolverine have a chance meeting when Venom unknowingly smashes up Wolverine's motorcycle. Wolverine's ready for revenge, but armed with the following tips, you can even the playing field. Wolverine is a devastating fighter at close range, so whenever possible, try to keep him at a distance by using Venom's tentacle attacks. There are a few gang members that Venom can feed on for energy, so be sure to fill up before the fight spills over into the dojo. Wolverine will attempt to jump over Venom and attack from behind, but a good tentacle swipe will stop him in his tracks and put you in a position to finish him off. Green Goblin is loose on the streets of Manhattan, and it's up to Spidey to save the day. Keep up with Goblin as he leads you through the streets, and be sure to use web zip in the areas where there are no buildings to swing from, or you'll definitely fall behind. During the chase, Goblin will attack a large billboard and bring it crashing down on some civilians. Be sure to avoid Goblin's fireballs before attempting to lift the rubble. Eventually, Goblin will turn on Spider-Man and the fight is on. Goblin is invincible when he's covered in flames, so dodge his fireball attacks and wait for him to tire out. When his flames turn off, that's your chance to land a few good hits. The fight will eventually lead indoors. At this point, Goblin will begin to use Pyroblast to beat Spider-Man. Be sure to use your web and swing out of the way to avoid the fire. Electro is helping Trask Industries test the Venom suit. As the battle leads into Times Square, Spider-Man enters the mix, but a lucky blow by Electro knocks him out. Both villains want a piece of your friendly neighborhood superhero, but who will win? At the beginning of the battle, Electro is vulnerable to Venom's melee attacks, but you need to get away before he charges up, or you'll suffer the consequences. Once Electro is low on health, he'll power himself up on one of the jumbo signs in Times Square. Electro is now pure energy, so going toe-to-toe with him is no longer an option. Venom can smash the fire hydrants around Times Square and release a torrent of water to knock Electro out of the air. Once Electro is on the ground and back in human form, get in there and do some damage. Another great way to get Electro is to quickly throw cars at him and knock him out of the air. The most reliable way to do this is to grab a car and then rapidly press the grab button again to make Venom throw it as fast as possible. Remember to keep the Venom suit fed, but whatever you do, don't feed on Electro. That will result in nothing but pain. Instead, chase down one of the tasty morsels, civilians running around Times Square. Electro will use the signs around Times Square for extra energy if he runs low. You can pull the plug on this by attacking the signs before Electro uses them to power up. So there you have it. I've given you everything you need to know to master the game, so now get out there and have fun.